You probably scroll past maybe 20 influencer ads a day, right?
Oh, easily. Probably more.
Yeah. And you just assume the teenager on the screen is pulling in a small fortune seamlessly. Like the aesthetic is perfect, the product placement is completely natural, and the friction just appears to be zero.
Right. It looks effortless.
Exactly.
Okay.
But behind that 15-second video is, well, it's a 90-day wait for a corporate check. It's a compliance nightmare regarding data protection. And, there's a corporate middleman desperately trying to bridge this gap between digital clout and analog accounting.
Yeah, the ecosystem looks pristine on your feed, but the financial plumbing underneath is, it's incredibly
Highly
complex. Right.
complex.
It's deeply fragmented and surprisingly vulnerable.
So that structural heavy lift is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking into Chatterbox Technologies Limited, or CHTR.
Which is an India-focused digital and influencer marketing services company.
Right. And our mission for you, the listener, is to figure out if this company is a durable, compounding growth engine in a really fast expanding sector, or, and this is the big question, if they're just a vulnerable middleman riding a temporary wave of marketing hype.
It's a vital question because the contrast between the polished front end of the creator economy and the chaotic back office reality is stark.
We're basically sifting through their financial reports, market analyses, and competitive overviews to find out what actually makes them tick.
Yeah.
Because, you've definitely bought something or at least clicked on a link because a creator recommended it.
Oh, everyone has.
But who orchestrates that connection?
Yeah.
And really, how lucrative is the matchmaking business behind the curtain?
Well, to understand just how lucrative it is, we first have to strip away the assumptions that come with their corporate name.
Right, the technologies part.
Exactly. When a company has technologies and its legal title, the immediate market reflex is to evaluate them as a pure software play. You instinctively look for a SaaS subscription model.
Yeah, you're expecting clean, recurring revenue, high gross margins.
And a product that scales with near zero marginal cost. But CHTR does not fit that profile at all. They are an IT-enabled marketing services and agency model.
Which means they aren't just selling a login to some dashboard where brands figure it all out themselves.
No, not at all.
Like, if I am an enterprise brand, I'm not paying CHTR a monthly subscription fee to blindly search a database of influencers. I am hiring them to execute.
Right. The execution is the core product. And CHTR operates primarily through two distinct but interconnected segments.
Let's break those down.
Sure. So the first is Chatterbox, which is their flagship influencer marketing offering. This is the engine that connects brands with social media creators. But again, it's not a passive directory. It involves end-to-end campaign architecture.
So they're doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. They're handling the strategic planning, sourcing the specific creators who align with the brand's demographic targets, executing the deliverables, ensuring compliance, and providing the final analytics.
Okay, then you have the second segment, CHTR Social. And this feels, honestly, entirely different from the matchmaking side of the business.
It really is. CHTR Social focuses on social media management and creative services. So this is where they step firmly into traditional digital agency territory.
Like running a brand's actual accounts.
Yes. They are handling ongoing content strategy, graphic design, video production, and broader brand storytelling. So instead of just, renting a creator's audience for a specific campaign, CHTR Social is managing the brand's own digital voice across platforms.
But looking at the sources, they don't just stop at those two main pillars. They've spun up this whole web of adjacent, highly specialized verticals.
Yeah, they've diversified quite a bit.
Like there's CHTR Studios, which handles the actual physical production, the shooting, the editing, the studio space.
Right, and they also operate Represent, which functions as a talent management arm.
Oh, so they represent the creators directly.
Exactly. Instead of just finding influencers for brands, Represent actually manages the careers of exclusive creators, negotiating on their behalf and building their individual brands.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Then they have Youth Inc., which targets the highly specific demographic of campus and youth marketing.
Which is fascinating because it tackles a very specific distribution problem. If a brand wants to infiltrate university campuses, standard digital ads often just get ignored.
Yes, students scroll right past them.
Right. You need students talking to other students.
Yeah.
And organizing hundreds of college-level micro-influencers requires a completely different logistical muscle than, say, hiring one Bollywood celebrity.
It's a completely different operational playbook, and that logistical muscle is further specialized in their Chatterbox vertical, which honestly is perhaps one of their most strategic assets.
Oh, Ratbox. This is the regional focus, right?
Yes, it focuses entirely on regional language influencer content. As digital penetration deepens across Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in India, the growth of internet users isn't happening in English.
Right. It's happening in Tamil, Telugu, Marathi, Bengali.
Exactly. Brands realize they cannot use a blanket national campaign to reach consumer in rural Uttar Pradesh. They need creators who speak the local dialect, who understand the cultural nuances, and who have authentic trust within that specific community.
And then just to round it out, they have CHTR International, which basically attempts to take all these localized capabilities and apply them to cross-border campaigns.
Right. So looking at this entire web, Chatterbox, Chatterbox Social represent Chatterbox. We need to trace how the cash actually changes hands.
Yeah, follow the money.
Exactly. The buyer is the brand or the advertiser. The end user is the target audience scrolling on their phone. The delivery mechanism is the influencer. But the revenue model relies on project and campaign billing.
So brands are paying service fees based on the scope and complexity of the execution.
Precisely. When a giant FMCG company approaches CHTR to launch a new product, they aren't paying a flat software fee. They are paying for the strategic brief, the hours spent identifying the right mix of macro and micro influencers,
The negotiation of individual contracts with those creators.
the production of the creative assets, and the final reporting. The billing is inextricably tied to the human labor and bespoke strategy poured into each campaign.
So they are effectively a modern hybrid. They're operating like a classic Hollywood talent agency through their Represent division, while simultaneously functioning like an old-school Madison Avenue advertising firm through Chatterbox and Social.
That's a perfect analogy.
They just happen to be running on digital rails instead of print and television.
Yeah, and framing them as a hybrid of talent management and traditional advertising highlights the fundamental friction in their business model.
The friction of scaling.
Exactly. Maintaining a services-led, high-touch approach is their most significant competitive advantage, but it is simultaneously their most restrictive structural bottleneck.
Well, the advantage seems obvious when you're dealing with enterprise clients. I mean, if I'm the chief marketing officer of a major bank, I do not want a self-serve software tool.
No, you want a dedicated account manager.
Right. I want someone to hold my hand, guarantee the brand safety of the creators we use, and honestly, take the blame if something goes wrong. I want strategy and accountability, not just a search engine.
And enterprise procurement demands that level of bespoke service, but the bottleneck becomes glaringly apparent when you try to scale that model.
Because it's not software.
Right. In a pure software business, adding your 1,000th client costs almost nothing in terms of incremental infrastructure. The software scales infinitely.
But in a services business like CHTR, scaling revenue requires a proportional increase in human capital.
Exactly. Every time they want to onboard 20 new enterprise clients, they have to hire more account managers, more data analysts, more creative directors.
More legal staff to review the contracts.
Yes. The revenue cannot decouple from the headcount. Their growth trajectory is dictated by campaign volume, client retention, and their ability to keep their specialized teams highly utilized.
It's a grind of constant execution.
It really is. They cannot rely on the passive compounding economics of software licensing. Every rupee earned requires active human facilitation.
Which means we really need to look closely at this sandbox they are operating in. Because if every rupee requires human effort, well, how many rupees are actually available in this specific market?
It's a great question, because the headlines always tout the total digital advertising spend in India as this astronomical, exponentially growing figure.
Yeah, tens of thousands of crores.
But we have to carve out the reality from the headlines. The total addressable market, the TAM for CHTR, is absolutely not the entirety of India's digital advertising spend.
Right, because when an analyst points to a multi-billion-dollar digital ad market, they're including Google search ads, programmatic display banners, Facebook performance marketing.
And CHTR does not compete for the vast majority of those budgets.
They aren't going after the budget a brand uses to bid on search terms.
Not at all. The precise equation to understand their actual sandbox is much narrower. You take the total digital ad spend in India, but you isolate only the specific percentage that brands allocate to influencer and creator formats.
Okay, so just the creator slice.
Right. Then you add the budgets from brands that outsource their organic social media management and content creation because they lack internal teams.
And when you filter out all that noise and run that specific equation, the addressable market shrinks. It goes from the tens of thousands of crores down to the low to mid thousands of crores annually.
Exactly. The sandbox is lucrative, but it is a highly specialized fraction of the broader digital ecosystem.
Still, a few thousand crores is a substantial sandbox.
It is, and that specialized fraction is characterized by a unique dynamic. It is a market that is only partially penetrated and structurally undermonetized relative to the sheer volume of consumer attention it commands.
I want to pause on that phrasing structurally undermonetized because it deserves a closer look. From the outside, the awareness seems absolute. Everyone is an influencer.
Right, it feels ubiquitous.
Every third video on a feed features a brand integration or a discount code. Consumer attention is clearly shifted away from traditional media straight into short-form vertical video. So why is the institutional monetization lagging so far behind the cultural reality?
Because cultural reality moves way faster than corporate procurement. Consumer attention migrated to short-form video almost overnight. But formal ad spend requires institutionalization.
Like corporate red tape.
Exactly. Large enterprise brands cannot just pivot their entire marketing budget based on a cultural trend. They need established metrics to measure return on investment. They need standardized contracting. They need fraud detection to ensure the followers are actually real.
So the awareness is there, but the actual plumbing required to confidently route hundreds of crores of institutional capital into the hands of 20-year-old content creators is still being built.
That's exactly it. The large, fast-moving consumer goods companies, the FMCGs, are clearly experimenting in building this plumbing. But the real white space, the untapped territory, seems to be the small and medium enterprises, the SMEs and regional brands.
SMEs represent this vast, unorganized frontier because historically, a local jewelry brand in Gujarat or a regional footwear company might just rely on informal, ad hoc promotions.
Right. They might literally hand cash to a local celebrity to post a picture, with zero tracking, zero contracts, and zero analytics.
Bringing those localized budgets into a formalized, trackable digital agency model, that is where the mid-thousands of crores can eventually expand.
And there are secular tailwinds driving that expansion: the sheer depth of smartphone penetration, the cheap data, the shift to mobile-first content consumption.
But the most compelling driver ties back to the Chatterbox vertical, doesn't it? The explosion of regional vernacular creators.
Absolutely. The English-speaking digital audience in India is largely saturated. The next 100 million consumers coming online are consuming content in their native languages.
And for an enterprise brand to reach these new consumers, the traditional slick English-first advertising campaign falls completely flat.
It does. They require hyper-localized, culturally resonant content. Identifying, vetting, and managing a campaign across a network of micro-influencers who speak Malayalam, Assamese, or Odia requires a level of logistical coordination that a brand simply cannot manage internally.
They are structurally forced to rely on an aggregator like CHTR.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really fascinating dynamic hidden in the sources.
The regulatory angle.
Yes. In almost every other sector, especially anything touching technology, aggressive government regulation is viewed as a growth killer. It adds compliance costs, slows down innovation, creates friction.
Right, it's usually a headwind.
But for CHTR, Indian regulatory frameworks appear to be one of their strongest structural tailwinds.
Which is so counterintuitive. But regulation in this specific context actually acts as a powerful catalyst for formalization. Let's look at the specific frameworks.
The government has introduced strict ad labeling guidelines to prevent deceptive marketing. Then you have the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, the DPDP, which dictates how audience and consumer data must be handled.
And the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, MITI, has laid out really stringent digital governance rules.
Right. So a brand can no longer just slide into a creator's direct messages, offer them 50,000 rupees to feature a product, and look the other way.
The liability risks have become way too severe. If an enterprise brand, say, a heavily regulated insurance provider, executes an informal influencer campaign that violates ad labeling laws or mishandles affiliate-linked data,
the regulatory blowback hits the brand, not just the creator. The compliance barrier has been raised exponentially.
So by raising the compliance barrier, the government essentially outlaws the informal shadow economy of influencer marketing. It forces the capital to flow through professional audited channels.
Exactly. Brands are compelled to seek out organized intermediaries. They require an agency that not only executes the creative vision, but also provides an impenetrable audit trail.
They need a partner who ensures every post has the correct hashtag disclosures, manages the data privacy requirements, handles the tax deductions at source for the creators.
Regulation eliminates the disorganized competitors and funnels the enterprise budgets directly toward established players like CHTR.
Okay, so if the government is practically mandating the use of organized middlemen, and the market is formalizing into a multi-thousand crore opportunity, CHTR is certainly not operating in a vacuum. Let's examine the gladiator arena they're fighting in. Who else is trying to capture these budgets?
Well, the competitive landscape is intensely fragmented. We are not looking at a mature market dominated by a tight oligopoly. The arena is crowded with a wide spectrum of players attacking the exact same budgets from completely different
The
angles.
named peers in the sources provide a really jarring mix. You have Signpost India, Bright Outdoor, RK Swami, Primera Promotions, and Veritas.
Right.
I mean, this isn't a list of 5 identical influencer platforms. You have legacy advertising conglomerates and companies historically known for physical billboards.
And that diversity reveals a crucial insight about the market structure. CHTR isn't just competing against other digital native creator platforms, they are competing against any agency capable of bundling campaign execution and media access.
Because when a brand allocates its annual marketing budget, they're evaluating whether to carve out a specific slice for a niche influencer agency like CHTR, or just hand the entire omni-channel budget, television, print, outdoor, digital, to a legacy giant like RK Swami.
Exactly. And an outdoor media company like Bright Outdoor or Signpost India jumping into the digital creator space shows that everyone realizes physical out-of-home advertising has to be integrated with digital amplification.
Right. A brand puts up a billboard in Mumbai, and they want local digital creators standing in front of it, posting it on their feeds to bridge that physical and digital divide.
It's all merging. And in this broad, aggressively competitive landscape, CHTR is a niche, small-cap specialist. They are a targeted instrument. They're not the dominant category leader. Entities like Signpost India and RK Swami operate with materially larger revenue bases and much deeper historical relationships with enterprise procurement boards.
Okay, so if they are structurally smaller and competing against legacy giants who can offer a one-stop shop for a brand's entire media spend, what stops a client from simply ignoring CHTR? What is their actual defensible moat?
Their primary moat is rooted in distribution and ecosystem density. They have basically constructed a two-sided marketplace. On the supply side, they boast access to over 300,000 influencers. On the demand side, they hold the enterprise brand relationships.
But let's interrogate that 300,000 influencer number. Because in the digital age, scraping public profiles and adding them to a database is trivial. Anyone can build a list of 300,000 names.
Very true.
The true moat isn't the size of the database, it's the depth of the integration.
And that depth of integration is visible in how their revenue is constructed. Their income isn't just coming from a shallow directory service. It is almost evenly split between brand solutions, which sits around the 36% to 43% range depending on the quarter, and their represent talent management division.
Ah, okay. That revenue split highlights a classic network effect.
Exactly.
Because if CHTR exclusively manages the top-tier talent through Represent, enterprise brands are forced to channel their budgets through CHTR to access those specific creators.
Yes, and conversely, because CHTR controls such a significant volume of enterprise ad spend through its brand solutions arm, up-and-coming creators are highly incentivized to sign exclusive management contracts with Represent.
Just to get a piece of that corporate budget.
Exactly. The two sides of the business feed each other, creating a localized gravity. The brand budget attracts the talent, and the exclusive talent attracts the brand budget. But we do have to be highly critical of their purported technology moat.
Yeah, because the company has technologies in its name. They heavily promote their in-house analytics, their automated workflow platforms, their data-driven matching algorithms. But based on the market reality, is that software actually a defensible barrier to entry?
The evidence suggests the technology advantage is largely unproven from a structural, long-term standpoint.
Really?
Yeah, the tech facilitates the workflow, sure. It tracks the deliverables, measures engagement rates, generates the reports. It is functional and necessary. But it is entirely vulnerable to commoditization.
Because a legacy giant like RK Swami has the capital to simply buy a white-label SaaS platform that performs the exact same matching and reporting functions. The code itself is not the moat.
Exactly. The paradox of their business is that their most defensible asset relies on analog human trust. The software is replicable. The accumulated campaign history, the institutional knowledge of which specific creators actually drive conversions versus those who just have vanity metrics, and the execution credibility built over hundreds of localized campaigns. That is the friction preventing a brand from easily switching to a competitor.
But the switching costs for the brands remain uncomfortably low to moderate, don't they?
They do.
I mean, if a brand only requires basic, commoditized campaign execution, just pushing out a standard product photo to 100 mid-tier creators, they can easily pull that capability in-house or hand it over to a generic digital agency.
CHTR only becomes sticky if they are deeply embedded in the brand's long-term creative strategy and compliance architecture.
Which exposes them to a severe threat from the larger generalist agencies. As influencer marketing transitions from an experimental novelty into a standardized line item on every corporate marketing budget, the legacy conglomerates will aggressively try to bundle it.
Yes. If an enterprise can execute their television, print, search, and influencer marketing through a single vendor relationship, the procurement efficiency might just outweigh the specialized execution quality CHTR offers.
So they are relying on a moat built on relationships and execution, fighting off legacy giants trying to commoditize their niche. We need to trace how that specific battle translates into actual financial performance.
Let's look at the numbers.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The financial trajectory over the last 3 years paints a picture of aggressive, blistering top-line acceleration. In FY22, they recorded a revenue of 31.98 crore.
Okay.
By FY25, that figure had nearly doubled to 59.45 crore. And the projections for FY26 show a massive leap, pushing the top line to 84.22 crore.
Wait, scaling from roughly 32 crore to over 84 crore in that time frame?
Huh.
I mean, that proves they found product market fit. They are undeniably capturing demand and executing campaigns at a rapidly increasing volume. But revenue is only the vanity metric. What happens when we look at the bottom line?
Well, the profit metrics reveal a much more complex narrative. In FY25, their PAT profit after tax sat at 8.86 crore. In FY26, despite that huge revenue jump to over 84 crore, the PAT only crept up to 9.20 crore.
Hold on, we need to pause and examine that divergence. Revenue jumped over 42% year over year from FY25 to FY26. But the actual profit only rose about 3.95%.
Yes.
A 42% increase in the money coming through the door resulted in less than a 4% increase in the money they actually get to keep. That is wild.
It is, and this divergence is the defining characteristic of their current financial phase. Between FY23 and FY25, they demonstrated substantial operating leverage. But in FY26, that leverage softened significantly. We see their EBITDA margins compress, dropping from a robust 20.6% down to around 17%.
If they're growing the top line at 42%, but margins are compressing, they are clearly in a scale-first, margin-later defensive posture.
Right, they are buying revenue.
In a fragmented market where legacy giants are trying to steal market share, CHTR seems perfectly willing to sacrifice short-term profitability just to lock in enterprise clients and block out competitors.
And that margin compression indicates heavy reinvestment and capacity expansion. To handle a 42% increase in campaign volume, they have to absorb upfront costs.
Like hiring.
Exactly. They are likely scaling their headcount aggressively, adding specialized account managers, expanding their physical studio presence for CHTR studios, and perhaps intentionally taking on larger, lower-margin enterprise contracts simply to secure the flagship logos for their portfolio.
Which circles right back to the fundamental dilemma of the services business model we discussed earlier. To deliver more campaigns, you have to hire more people. The human capital costs rise in tandem with the revenue.
Yes, and the critical question for their future valuation is what happens when they cross a much larger scale threshold. Say they push past 150 crore or 200 crore.
Will they be able to standardize and automate enough of the workflow to decouple their revenue growth from their headcount growth?
That's the million-dollar question. If their proprietary technology can eventually automate the creator onboarding, the contract generation, and the compliance tracking, they might be able to push those EBITDA margins back up into the mid-20s.
But currently, the data shows they're absorbing the heavy friction costs of scaling an operationally intense business.
Right.
Now, a surging top line and a strategic sacrifice in margins is a classic growth narrative. It looks acceptable on an income statement. But the income statement is only half the story.
Very true.
We need to look at the balance sheet to see if the foundation supporting this 42% revenue growth is actually solid, or if they are building a skyscraper on sand.
Well, a surface-level review of the balance sheet reveals some highly pristine, comforting metrics. The company carries zero debt.
Zero.
Zero net debt. They face absolutely no visible refinancing risk, no interest coverage anxieties, and their contingent liabilities are remarkably sitting at zero.
Okay, a zero-debt balance sheet is a fantastic defensive shield. It means they aren't hostage to fluctuating interest rates or aggressive creditors.
Hmm.
But the sources reveal a glaring, systemic red flag hiding just beneath that pristine surface.
They do. The red flag is the severe structural chasm between their reported operating profit and their actual operating cash flow.
Okay, hit me with the numbers.
In FY25, the income statement proudly reported an operating profit of 12.04 crore. But when you track the actual liquidity entering the bank accounts, the operating cash flow was a mere 3.06 crore.
Wait, they generated over 12 crore in profit on paper, but only 3 crore of actual usable cash materialized. That divergence is a giant red flag. Where is the missing 9 crore?
It is entirely absorbed by the structural mechanics of their working capital, and the most damning metric illustrating this absorption is their debtor days. In FY22, it took the company an average of 75.49 days to collect payment from their clients.
Okay, about 2.5 months.
By FY25, that collection period had stretched to a staggering 88.46 days.
Nearly 3 months. It's like running a highly successful, fully booked lobster restaurant, right?
Let's hear it.
Every single table is ordering the lobster, the most expensive item on the menu. The revenue looks incredible, but every single customer finishes their meal, walks up to the register and says, "Put it on my tab, I'll pay you in 3 months."
Right.
The restaurant feels incredibly rich on paper, but the actual cash register is completely empty.
That analogy perfectly captures the systemic strain on their liquidity. The strain is dictated by their position as the intermediary. On one side of the transaction, they have thousands of individual content creators, and these creators demand payment almost immediately upon posting the content.
Obviously. Plus, they've got to cover their own payroll.
Yes. CHTR has to pay its own internal staff, its studio rent, and its tech infrastructure costs on a strict 30-day monthly cycle.
But on the other side of the transaction, the entities actually funding the ecosystem are massive FMCG conglomerates and enterprise brands. And these corporate giants dictate the terms.
They operate on rigid 90-day or even 120-day procurement payment cycles. The brand says, "We will process the invoice in 90 days. The 21-year-old influencer says, "I am not uploading this video until the money is in my account."
So CHTR is caught in the middle, structurally forced to fund the float. They are paying out cash on day 1 and waiting until day 90 to get reimbursed.
This creates a cash conversion cycle that is steadily worsening as they take on larger enterprise clients who have the leverage to demand even longer payment terms.
Which introduces a terrifying macroeconomic vulnerability. What happens in an economic downturn? Those receivables sitting on the balance sheet at 88 or 90 days aren't just delayed cash, they are unsecured loans to their clients.
Exactly.
If the broader market tightens and a few major clients decide to stretch their payments to 150 days or default entirely, those receivables instantly turn into catastrophic bad debts.
This is why the zero-debt balance sheet is not just a luxury. It is a structural necessity. If they carried a heavy debt burden while simultaneously funding a 90-day cash conversion cycle, a single delayed payment from a major client could trigger a liquidity crisis.
They are using their clean balance sheet to absorb the working capital drain. But gravity eventually pulls down even the fastest-growing companies if the cash flow doesn't align with the reported profit.
Right.
So they're walking a tightrope. They're funding their own 40% revenue growth with internal cash, absorbing the delayed payments of enterprise clients, and sacrificing margins to maintain market share. With this precarious balancing act in mind, what are the specific paths they are charting for the future? How do they plan to maintain this growth without snapping the tightrope?
Well, they have articulated a few distinct strategic growth vectors. The primary vector relies on deeper penetration of their existing accounts. The strategy is intensive cross-selling.
So moving them from one segment to another.
Exactly. If a regional brand approaches them solely for a Chatterbox influencer campaign to launch a product, CHTR's immediate goal is to upsell them. They want to transition that client into CHTR Social, taking over the day-to-day management of the brand's entire social media presence, designing their graphics, running their ongoing strategy.
They want to stop selling one-off projects and start capturing a larger share of the brand's total annual marketing wallet.
Yes. And the second growth vector is premiumization. They recognize the margins on basic matchmaking. Simply finding a creator and taking a 10% cut are rapidly commoditizing.
So they need to add more value.
They are aggressively pushing to handle full-scale strategic campaign management. When they control the creative direction, the high-end studio production through CHTR studios and the proprietary analytics, they evolve from a disposable vendor into an indispensable strategic partner. And that evolution commands a significantly higher margin.
Right. And the third vector ties back to the technology dilemma we discussed. They're betting that digital automation can eventually solve their headcount bottleneck.
Yes. If they can use AI and automated workflows to streamline the repetitive tasks of contract generation, compliance checking, and performance reporting, they might finally be able to scale their campaign throughput without having to double their account management team.
It is a logical, coherent playbook,
Mm-hmm.
but executing it requires navigating a minefield of existential threats. The most immediate, pressing risk documented in the sources is their severe customer concentration.
It is quite severe.
Their top 5 clients account for anywhere from 22% to a staggering 49% of their total revenue, depending on the period analyzed.
Think about that for a second.
If almost half of their entire revenue is derived from just 5 corporate clients, they are barely an independent agency. They are effectively operating as an outsourced marketing department for a handful of conglomerates. How does management sleep at night knowing that level of concentration exists?
It is a dangerous double-edged sword. Because expanding wallet share with your largest, most successful clients is undeniably the fastest, most efficient path to revenue growth in the short term. It requires less client acquisition cost,
Yeah.
but it inherently exacerbates the concentration risk. If a new chief marketing officer takes over at just one of those top 5 brands and decides to consolidate all digital spending with a legacy giant like RK Swamy, or worse, decides to build an internal influencer team.
CHTR's top line could suffer a catastrophic collapse in a single quarter.
Exactly.
And beyond the concentrated power of their clients, they're also entirely at the mercy of the platforms. CHTR does not own the distribution rails. They don't own YouTube, Instagram, or Snapchat.
No, they don't.
If a platform arbitrarily changes its algorithm to deprioritize affiliate links or alters its policy on sponsored content visibility, CHTR's campaign metrics could plummet overnight, and they would have absolutely no recourse.
Platform dependence is the baseline risk of the entire creator economy. But the broader structural existential threat facing CHTR is the looming specter of big tech disintermediation. We have to consider the end game of the major social platforms themselves.
Right, because the platforms already control the audience and the creators. They don't want an agency extracting 20% of the value in the middle.
Precisely. If artificial intelligence continues to advance, the platforms will inevitably build highly efficient in-house creator marketplaces. Imagine a scenario where a brand can log directly into a platform, input their target demographics and budget, and an AI instantly curates the perfect list of creators.
It automatically generates the legal contracts, facilitates the payments, and produces real-time campaign reporting.
Exactly. If the platform can automate the matchmaking, the compliance, and the analytics, the entire middleman layer that CHTR occupies is rendered obsolete.
The bespoke, high-touch human service becomes an unnecessary friction point rather than a value add.
And this potential for disintermediation shapes the strategic endgame for companies like CHTR. It is highly plausible that they are positioning themselves as an acquisition target.
Oh, that makes sense.
When you hold an integrated, localized network of 300,000 regional creators and possess the institutional knowledge of executing thousands of vernacular campaigns, you become an incredibly attractive puzzle piece for a legacy conglomerate.
A traditional agency looking to modernize their offerings overnight could just acquire CHTR. It solves their influencer capability gap instantly.
And CHTR gets absorbed into a larger balance sheet that can actually handle the 90-day working capital drain without breaking a sweat.
With these ambitious growth vectors and severe existential risks balancing on a knife edge, the final component we really must evaluate is the stewardship of the company. Who is steering the ship through this volatility, and how is the broader market pricing the journey?
Assessing the management team requires looking at both what is explicitly in the data and what is glaringly absent.
Well, on the positive side, their historic execution is demonstrably strong. You cannot debate the numbers. They have driven excellent revenue growth and maintained solid EBITDA multiples over a chaotic 3-year period.
Right. They are undeniably delivering on top-line expansion in a fragmented, highly competitive market.
But the sources present a frustrating lack of transparency regarding corporate governance. We have significant gaps in the evidence.
Very significant. There is missing information on board independence, the presence and nature of related party transactions, and the specific architecture of executive compensation structures.
And without visibility into the compensation structures, it's difficult to know if management is incentivized to chase unprofitable top-line revenue just to hit bonus targets, or if they are genuinely aligned with long-term sustainable shareholder value.
We do have one stabilizing metric, though. The promoters currently hold 60.39% of the outstanding shares, and crucially, 0% of those shares are pledged as collateral.
Okay, a high unpledged promoter holding reduces immediate alarm regarding their commitment to the business. But the lack of deeper governance transparency introduces an unquantifiable risk discount.
It does.
Given the strong execution juxtaposed with the governance gaps and the severe working capital strain, what is the market's current consensus? How are investors pricing this specific asset?
The market appears to be in a transitional phase regarding CHTR. They are pricing in durable, continuous growth, but the honeymoon phase of expecting explosive, unchecked hypergrowth accompanied by straight-line margin expansion has decidedly ended.
The market realizes that the 42% revenue growth didn't translate to the bottom line, and they were adjusting their expectations accordingly.
The core debate defining the market sentiment right now is a matter of categorization. Is CHTR a still scaling compounder that is simply passing through a temporary strategic margin dip as it heavily reinvests in specialized talent and regional infrastructure?
Or is it a mature services business where the structural limitations of headcount scaling mean the best operating leverage is permanently in the rearview mirror?
We can look at their historical capital allocation for clues to management's own belief. From FY22 all the way through FY25, the company paid 0 dividends.
They haven't distributed a single rupee of profit back to shareholders.
A zero dividend policy over a multi-year period demonstrates a pure aggressive reinvestment strategy. They are plowing every available unit of cash back into the operational machine to chase scale, fund the working capital deficit, and build out verticals like Chatterbox.
And if that aggressive reinvestment strategy actually works, the payoff could fundamentally alter the trajectory of the company. If they can successfully execute their plan to double the revenue contribution of the Chat Social segment by FY27, they will initiate a huge transition in the quality of their earnings.
Transitioning from the choppy, unpredictable nature of one-off project billing in Chatterbox to the sticky, retainer-based recurring revenue of social media management in Chatterbox Social would completely transform their financial profile.
It provides the predictability and revenue visibility that public markets crave, which could result in a significant upward re-rating of their valuation multiple.
But to achieve that re-rating, they have to prove they can make that transition without snapping the tightrope of their stretched working capital and without losing their top 5 clients to a legacy competitor.
So if you're analyzing this space, you aren't simply making a passive bet that the creator economy is going to get bigger. That macro trend is obvious. You are making a highly specific micro bet that the organized middleman can maintain their leverage, extract their margin, and survive the squeeze between big tech platforms on one side and demanding enterprise clients on the other.
It requires navigating a constantly shifting landscape where the fundamental rules of engagement are rewritten by algorithmic updates and regulatory shifts on a quarterly basis.
It's wild. Let's briefly recap the journey we've taken today. We started by looking beyond the polished aesthetic of the creator economy to examine the complex, often chaotic financial plumbing underneath.
Right.
We dissected Chatterbox Technologies, a company that has successfully carved out a highly lucrative, specialized niche in India's digital ecosystem, boasting impressive top-line acceleration pushing past 84 crore.
But we've also exposed the invisible structural gravity pulling at their foundation. The heavy friction of a services model, a cash conversion cycle stretching toward 90 days.
And a terrifying customer concentration risk where just 5 corporate clients hold the keys to half their entire kingdom.
As we conclude, there is one final overarching dynamic that demands consideration. As enterprise brands become more sophisticated in their digital procurement and as individual creators mature into highly organized microbusinesses, the knowledge gap between the two sides is rapidly shrinking.
That's a great point.
We are moving toward a world where every top-tier creator utilizes an AI agent to manage their inbound inquiries, filter contracts, and negotiate rates. Simultaneously, every enterprise brand will have an AI-driven procurement tool capable of instantly finding the perfect demographic match and auditing the compliance of a campaign in real time.
Wow.
When both the supply side and the demand side are perfectly optimized by artificial intelligence, the very definition and utility of a human-led marketing agency is going to fundamentally break.
It really is.
The most critical question isn't whether Chatterbox can outmaneuver their legacy competitors today. It's whether their entire category of intermediary services will even exist in its current labor-intensive form 5 years from now.
Will the market even need a middleman when the software can facilitate the trust? It's a structural question that hovers over every single agency operating in the digital space. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the infrastructure, the incentives, and the hidden mechanics behind the content you consume every day. See you next time.